Greetings. So today I am going to talk about Article 2, the current Article 2, and the proposed Article 2. If you didn't grab them on the way in, on the music stand in the back, I have printouts of both so that you can do a comparison if you want to flip back and forth. So I want to start with talking about what Article 2 currently is. So this is the start of it. It has several different sections, but section C2.1 are the principles. These are the principles that we talk about all the time, the 7 principles. So they are actually in our bylaws, and they're written as we affirm and promote these 7 different principles. And then in the next part, still in the same section, they talk about the sources. And the idea is that the sources are where these principles come from. So they come from the experience with mystery and wonder. They come from Christian, Judeo-Christian traditions. They come from world religion traditions. They come from science. They come from our work with the environment. So there's 6 different sources. So those 6 sources inform where those 7 principles come from. There's a handout on the music stand if you want to follow along. So that is section 1. Then after the 6 sources, they say, so grateful for the religious pluralism which enriches and ennobles our faith, we are inspired to deepen our understanding and expand our vision. As free congregations, we enter into this covenant, promising to one another our mutual trust and support. So we have our principles, we have our sources, and then they have a line that works as the covenant. So they tie this all together in section 1. And then in section 2, they talk about the purposes, and the purposes of UUism. So they say that we should devote its resources to exercise its corporate powers for religious, educational, and humanitarian purposes. The primary purpose is to serve the needs of its member congregations, to organize new congregations, and extend and strengthen UUism and its principles. And then it talks a little bit about systems of power and privilege and oppression. So scattered throughout Article 2 are a bunch of different ideas, although a lot of these UUs in general don't really realize that these exist. Because we talk about the 7 principles a lot. We talk about the sources a little, but we try to lift up the sources also. But then when we get into the covenant part, we don't really see that. And then the purposes, this kind of seems like, oh, that's just, telling the, corporate UU how to function. And then there's a I think at some point they struck 3. So part 4 is freedom of belief. We're not saying that anybody has to believe anything. There is no creed. People are not forced to believe a certain thing, but we would like you to have beliefs, just like our kids that did the service today. But it's not creedal. So that is our current Article 2. So in the bylaws somewhere, and I think this is something that they have to do legally, is that since this is in the bylaws, they have to go back and they'll review the bylaws. And specifically the Article 2 part, they'll do a review to see if maybe things have changed and maybe we need to add some new ideas to it. And the last time it was changed was in 1987. They changed majorly. They have done some minor word editing, but other than that, the concepts are still all the same as from 1987. There was a push to add an eighth principle that was about oppression and racism, and a number of congregations adopted that, but as a denomination, it had not been adopted yet into the Article 2. So a group was put together to look at Article 2, and they were told, start from scratch. You don't have to use what's already there as a basis. Feel free to come up with a new concept, a new way of doing it. So that way it's not just keep amending things, because when you keep amending things and changing what you already have, you're still kind of stuck with old time thought with maybe some new time words, but it over time it turns into mush. So the Article 2 Commission came back with some changes. So the following is the proposed revision to Article 2, and they start off with, well, that slide ended up in the wrong spot. Did it? Oh no. So they went to purposes. We're going to start with the purposes. What is the purpose of Unitarian Universalism? Well, the purpose is to assist congregations in their vital ministries, which was in the previous Article 2, to support and train leaders, both lay and professional. There's a new thought. To foster lifelong faith formation and spiritual development. So it's not just business. It is, as a denomination, we want people to be lifelong learners, to heal historic injustices, to support and encourage the creation of new Unitarian Universalist communities, and to advance UU values into the world. And the Unitarian Universalist Association will actively engage its members in the transformation of the world through liberating love. So that's part one. So the purposes are now at the top. And then we want to talk about our values in the covenant. So as UUs, we're starting with the covenant. We covenant the congregation, and through our association to support and assist one another in our ministries. And we draw from our heritages of freedom, reason, hope, and courage, building on the foundation of love. Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. And we are accountable to one another for doing this work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. And they keep saying love is at the center, and they're going to actually have a visual that shows that love is at the center. So now, instead of 7 principles, what they've done is, if you were to ask a minister or many religious educators or just UUs in general, and you go, what are the 7 principles? Well, inherent worth and dignity, and we care for the planet. And there's 5 other ones in there. So it's hard to remember what those principles are. You know, there's peace and justice for people, and democratic process, and learning together, and peace for the world. So with this, we start off with 6 words, 6 values. We have, and I know it's small there, but it is on the paper if you grabbed it. So we have justice, We have interdependence. We have equity, transformation, pluralism, and generosity. Now we have 6 words that we can remember, and maybe based on those 6 words, we can use that to help us remember what goes along with those words. And we have a nice little graphic that we can show. And this graphic is actually in the article, the proposed Article 2, and they even have a description, and I think it's on the printout, I didn't put it up here. They have a descriptor that tells you what that looks like, and it's in the square box. So now let's break down those 6 values. Interdependence. So we honor the interdependent web of all existence with reverence for the great web of life, and with humility, we acknowledge our place in it. All right, so now we've defined what interdependence is, and here's where the proposed Article 2 makes a huge difference over the previous one. The previous one would pretty much do like the first line, but the second part is a call to action. It's actually telling you what you can do with this word. What can you do with this idea? So we covenant to protect Earth and all beings from exploitation. We will create and nurture sustainable relationships of care and respect, mutuality and justice. We will work to repair harm and damaged relationships. So the big question that people have about the proposed Article 2 is, are we throwing the 7 principles out? Are they just going away? Maybe in the form of the 7 principles, but all those concepts are still there in Article 2. So for this one, it definitely matches up with our 7th principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And because the 7 principles are not necessarily in the bylaws does not mean that we can still use those, at least during a transition period, because we do have a lot of our religious education is based on the 7 principles. Our chalice lightings are the 7 principles. So there's things that we'll need to transition to move over into these new values. So the next value, and the interesting thing is that it's not the second value, it happens to be the second one that I've listed, but we're not saying that any one is more important than the other. Now the thing with the 7 principles is that they are linear. If you look at the 7 principles, you start with singularity, the inherent worth of dignity of everyone. And the 7th principle is everything. And if you follow that line, it's actually an arc that goes from the singularity to everything. So it's the second principle is the interactions between people should be with equity and justice and fairness. And if you look at the 6th principle, it is about how the world should be treated. There should be peace in the world. So if you ever get a chance, look at the 7 principles and see that it is linear. So now with the proposed Article 2 is that our 6 values, no one of them is more important than the other. They are all important. So pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. And here's our call to action. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And we embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. And if you were to look, that you can see the 1st principle and the 4th principle in this value. Justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. And the call to action is we covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions within our congregations, our association, and society at large. So you can see some of our principles in there, but also if you look, one of the sections It was either in the purposes or one of the others, they talk about oppression and how we interact. So they've actually pulled some other parts from the old Article 2 or the current Article 2. Also, the proposed eighth principle that has not been adopted by the denomination, but still the concept of it is in this also. Transformation. We adapt to the changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages, never complete and never perfect, which ties into our third principle, the acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in congregations. Our next value is generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. And this is an idea, the specific idea, we don't really have in our current principles or sources. You may kind of see a hint to it in the other parts of it that nobody ever sees or looks at. But we covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality, which lines up with our second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. But the second principle, it says, yes, we promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, but we don't say how. So now we're saying, here's how you can do that. Here's your call to action. Equity. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness. So we covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. And inclusivity is something that hasn't really been brought to the forefront from the current Article 2. And accessibility, that's kind of a new concept of having that radical hospitality of making sure that we're fully accessible and fully inclusive in our communities. So that is where creating this from fresh allows us to bring in these ideas without trying to take old concepts and rewrite them and add words. So this one actually brings in 3 of our current principles: the inherent worth and dignity, justice, equity, and compassion, and the goal of world community, peace, liberty, and justice for all. So the next part of Article 2 is the inspirations. And now what they've done is, instead of saying we have 6 sources, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, now they've kind of poetically written, here's where all these concepts have come from. So they come from the direct experience of transcending mystery and wonder, and are the primary source of UU inspiration. These experiences open our hearts, renew our spirits, and transform our lives. We draw upon and are inspired by sacred, secular, and scientific understandings to help us make meaning and live into our values. And these sources ground us and sustain us in ordinary, difficult, and joyous times. We respect the histories and contexts and cultures in which these sources were created and are currently practiced. Grateful for the experiences that move us, aware of the religious ancestries we inherit, and enlivened by the diversity which enrich our faith. We are called to ever deepen and expand our wisdom. So if you look at our current 6 sources, so you flip the pages and put them side by side, you can see all the words from the sources are in here, but it definitely has much more of a flow to it and more ideas and concepts that were pulled from the purposes, that were pulled from the the inspirations. So all that is now pulled together into a single concept. And we focus specifically on inclusion. That has become a big part of who UUs are, is trying to be more inclusive, trying to make it more accessible. So now we are explicitly talking about inclusion instead of just kind of alluding to it. So systems of power, privilege, and oppression have traditionally created barriers for persons and groups with particular identities, ages, abilities, and histories. We pledge to replace such barriers with ever-widening circles of solidarity and mutual respect. We strive to be an association of congregations that truly welcome all persons who share our values. We commit to being an association of congregations that empowers and enhances everyone's participation, especially those with historically marginalized identities. The inherent worth and dignity of every person. So this is a powerful message that we have not had in the past. It's a powerful message. And taking all these ideas, the values, and the inspiration and inclusion, makes Article 2, which is in the bylaws of the UUA, makes it a much more powerful idea of who we are as a denomination. And then as the current Article 2 does, so does this, the freedom of belief. Congregational freedom and the individual right of conscience are central to our Unitarian Universalist heritage, and congregations may establish statements of purpose, covenants, and bonds of union so long as they do not require that members adhere to a particular creed. So we still want to make sure that we're non-creedal. That is the proposed Article 2 versus the current Article 2. And I would like to open the floor up to, if you have any questions, come on forward to the mic and we will try to figure out answers for you, either me or other people here that might have answers too. Mr. Shinkat.
Long walk for a simple question. How has this changed in the last few months? Is it any different than what it was last fall or last summer?
So last summer, when it was introduced to the General Assembly, there were a few more values. There were peace was one of them. I think there's one other one, and some of the words have changed in the values. So transformation, I think, was change, and I'm gonna quick go back to the image. I know there was one other one that had a different word. So some of the words have changed. So there are some proposed amendments that are going to be proposed at GA. So this Article 2 is what's being proposed by the Commission. But as with all business meetings, they have the opportunity to amend. So it's not amendments from the floor. These are amendments that have been vetted and been proposed by groups and has been gone over by the Commission. Because a lot of times they'll get like 3 different amendments that all really say the same thing but differently, and they need to figure out how do we, provide that without doing 3 different amendments. Let's make one amendment and wordsmith the words.
So, by the end of GA, something will have changed?
So if there's amendments made, then whatever those amendments are will be added to or put into this proposal. And then at GA, the delegates there will vote whether to accept the new Article 2 or reject it. And if it's rejected, it's gonna be like that for at least the next 10, probably 15 years. Because the process, this was a 3-year process. So they initiated it in 2022. They worked on it then, they proposed it in 2023, and then they are putting it up for vote 2024.
I want simply to ask, where can we see any reference to the amendments that may be?
I don't know. Otherwise, I would have had him here. I think some of them aren't necessarily finalized yet. They closed the taking of the amendments, I think like at the end of March.
Oh,
So it's a live, ongoing action.
so we're in real-time
Yeah.
motion here.
Yep.
So I'm guessing that the likeliest answer to my question would be refer to the website.
Yes, so if you go to the UUA website, there's a search bar, search on Article 2, and that's article with the 2 I's, capital I's, and you'll get more information than you ever wanted. But you'll, other than what the current amendments will be, or the current amendments asked to be adapted for this Article 2. Bridget.
So I like the idea that there's not an order to them, that they're all of equal importance, but they are assigned a color, and each kid who's ever grown up knows the colors of the rainbow and what order they go in. Was that intentional? Is there some kind of mnemonic device that's being used so that people can help remember those words, since part of the problem with the principles was that people couldn't remember the principles? Maybe this is all too early because that will come after it is adopted, but I'm guessing as a religious educator that you are already thinking ahead about this, and I'm wondering if there's been discussion about that, and if the rainbow order actually kind of is an intentional order, even though they're all of equal significance.
Good question.
Thank you.
So I don't know if you noticed, but when I listed the 7 principles, that they are each a different color because they are in the color of Roy G. Bibb. So the first principle is red, second principle is orange, and red for respect. So, so there was a mnemonic that the kids used, that we used as a, religious educators to help us remember, and we saw them as, you know, the rainbow went with the principles. I do not know. I think they wanted to keep the concept of the rainbow, but I don't know if they were necessarily saying, you know, whichever one's red is, you know, so is equity first? I don't know, interdependence second? I don't know. So I don't know. Now in the description that is on the printout, they give an actual description of it, and I know that they talk about the colors, but I don't think they specifically say, and the words should be with this color. Yes, they do. They do? Yeah. Okay. So take that for what you want it to mean. Mnemonics to help remember these. I told the one that is being floated about in in the religious educator realm. I mentioned to Mandy, and she's like, no. So imagine a pig flying through the air with a jetpack on its back. Jet pig. J for justice, E for equity, T for transformation, P for pluralism, I for interdependence, and G for generosity. And there's actual images that people have created of the jet pig. Some people have gone out and bought pig stuffies and put a jetpack on the back of it. I understand Mandy's no, because that's not the image you want. We go to this church where we worship the jet pig. If you come up with another mnemonic acronym, let me know. I talked about there might be 2 other values. So 2 other values were removed and kind of reintegrated into these 6 values because we didn't want to have too many. However, there is an amendment to add these 2 back in. So religious educators have also created a mnemonic for that also. I don't remember what it is. It was more acceptable than jet pig. I can't remember what I did last week, let alone.
You know, I just want to say that with the original 7 principles, I never felt like one was more important than 6 or 7.
Right.
But that's why I like the picture, is that you know that with love being the most important, and you know, the mnemonic is just to remember them, and it's not doing an order of importance or anything.
Right.
You know, and I like jet pig,
Yeah.
but what can I say?
Yeah, and yes, so the 7 principles are, 1 through 7, but like I said, because of the linearity to it, it does have that, going from singularity to everything. So it wasn't necessarily that one is more important than the other. It's just like, let's, start here and we go out to the world. Chris.
Curiosity about the amendment process. I get the 3 to 1 kind of thing, and then at GA, will there be amendments, and that be a vote on the amendment first to add peace, and then a second vote to okay, yes or no for the whole thing?
So any of the amendments that are proposed,
Right.
which are already known or
Right.
will be known,
Right. So,
those will be proposed during the general
and
session.
who will accept them? The GA people?
The people at GA.
Okay.
So there will be,
Except for the-
probably 4 or 5 vetted amendments.
Right.
And they have like 90 minutes to do this.
Okay.
So if at 90 minutes, they've only done 3 of them, that's it, unless the body says, no, we're going to extend another half hour.
Okay.
And, that's going to cut off from lunch, or that's going to cut off from, the workshops. So once the amendments are made and either accepted or rejected, then the Article 2 with any amendments
Accepted
will be voted on by the body
Okay.
or by the delegates.
So other than the amendment process that you've been talking about, do you think this is pretty much a done deal, that it will get voted through? And then secondly, I asked that only, I mean, I guess the editor and me, and I've been following this, you know, medium level for over the years, paying attention to a lot of things. Wonderful job in so many ways, but in a lot of ways we kind of did what UUs do, is we took something decently clear and we made it even less clear. But I see redundancy in a lot of these, and a lot of wordiness, unnecessary wordiness. And then I just see like things that are just the same, and I can't help it. It's my editor brain kind of going into full blown. But like I said, I've been following it, and there's so much I love about it. Don't get me wrong. So I just am wondering, you know, do you think that this is probably a done deal other than the amendments that are in the works currently?
In my humble opinion, I think that this will most likely pass, as is. With amendments, probably, because it's the same people that are voting for the amendments that will be voting to accept it. And I think with the wordiness, no disrespect, but a lot of people that were on the commission were ministers. They like words. But also, yes, there is some redundancy, but it allows you to still be able to focus on one of the values and still be able to get those different ideas in there, or to focus on different areas. And it's redundancy in that if you missed it here, you'll catch it there. And I know this was wordsmithed to death. It's wordsmithed by committee, which you know how that goes. And I think part of it was also they wanted to be poetic so that it's easier to say some of the things, whether that you take that or not. You know, that's kind of my opinion. You know, they're kind of adding a poetry to it or something that's more, has more flow to it. But yeah, so there's wordiness. However, I think that was probably what was missing from the original 7 principles, is that it was too succinct. So because it was so succinct, there's no action attributed to it. It was just, here's you know, how we think people should be with each other, but there's nothing to say, and we're going to do something about it to make this happen. Because it said we affirm and promote. It didn't say we affirm, promote, and try to fix. Mr. Larson.
So I too thought about the wordiness, and it seemed a little mushy to me. But as this discussion's been going on, it does show an interconnectivity between the 6
Right.
as well. And then as far as the acronym, I came up with TIE, like a necktie. And for people who think of computer files, JPEG, JPG.
Noted. Robert.
I was talking with Caroline about our sort of emotional attachment to the principles and the sources. As this gets voted in, will there be sort of a way to reference our history and heritage of the evolution of our ideas so we could sort of easily go back and reread the 7 principles and the sources and that kind of thing, do you think?
Yes. So, I mean, you can still find the principles and sources that were originally done in 1966, 67, when the 2 denominations joined together. Also, if you open up the hymnal and you go to Roman numeral 6, page Roman numeral 6, you'll find the principles and sources there. And I don't see us buying new hymnals in the next 10, 15 years. Or at least we're not going to do a complete, you know, trade-in. Also, we have posters in the church. They're not going to go away. It's just another thing for us to make reference to. So we can still do the Do Re Mi song that sings the 7 principles, and that's perfectly fine, because those same concepts are in the proposed Article 2. It's just over time, we will make more reference to the new Article 2 than we will the 7 principles, but it's not going to be overnight. It's going to be several years before curricula catches up to, using the 6 values or whatever 8 values maybe, or 7, who knows. Yeah, the 7 principles aren't going to go away. They'll be around for a while. Yes, Jenny.
This is probably like a UU 101 question, but can you define creed for me, and then like the difference between belief and creed? Because I know that shows up in the last one.
So a creed is a belief. So the kids today for the service, they did their belief statements. We also call them credos, which is, so the difference between, the key word here is that we are a non-creedal denomination, meaning that we are not going to tell you what to believe. You can still have, we still want you to have beliefs, but we're not going to tell you what it is. So a creed is your belief. So it might be, if you go to a Christian denomination, you have to say that I believe in Jesus Christ, the Lord, the Savior, and so that is, the difference. Did that answer your question? So the difference between a value and a belief? So they all tie in together, and this is something we do with the kids, is that we may talk about values, and from those values we say, so 7 principles, we believe that every person has worth and inherent worth and dignity, and we believe that there should be fairness and justice and equity between people. So we're giving you those values, and from those values you will create beliefs. Does that make sense? Yeah. I mean, your morals and your ethics and your values all help inform what you believe. Any other questions?
Okay, I thought of another acronym. It was related on the last one. Pet jig. So we can imagine all of our pets doing a jig because they are now included in all of the...
All right, that one I'm going to write down. And I will do the JPEG. So, pet jig. All right, Sarah?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, as a much newer member, I find this to be more accessible, visually pleasing, and I love that love is at the center of it, because that wasn't really front and center with the 7 principles. And I like the 7 principles, otherwise I wouldn't have been drawn here. But this seems like something easier to digest and explain when I'm explaining to my friends. Like, I joined this new church, I'm almost always like, no, but it's not that kind of church.
Yep,
It's a good one, and this gives me, a nice way of explaining that, so.
I can see T-shirts with a Judge Big on it.
Pets jigging, pets jigging.
I had also was thinking about pet jig, and I was just thinking about, a jig being like a playful dance, and a pet, something that you devote care and attention to. So it also can.
Yeah, thank you, Olivia. Mr. Brown.
I'm looking at I think this is great. I think this whole thing is pretty awesome, and I love the, I don't know, the sort of template that they've put to each one of these with the actions that go with each of these. I'm just wondering, equity and justice, can you have justice without equity? And is there equity outside of justice? I'm trying to decide if I think it actually deserves its own bubble there or not. I don't know, just a thought.
So a concept, a buzzword that the UUs started really throwing out there quite a bit, probably 10, 15 years ago, is intersectionality. The fact that, oppression against a race isn't just about race, it's also about classism. It's also about, it could be LGBTQ issues. So you still want to say there's racism, you still want to say that there's issues against classism, there's issues against, so yes, they might cross over, so there's intersectionality within these values, but it's still important to name that value. Thanks for buying that. How you doing?
So I just thought I'd throw in the opinion that I think the graphic is the best part of this whole thing. I think it encapsulates pretty much everything in a very simple and memorable way. I love the graphic, for what it's worth. I also think, having read through everything that has been handed out, I don't see much of a difference or any difference in the essence and substance of one to the other. Some of the wording is different, but the essence is, I think, the same, and the substance is, I think, the same. So it doesn't really strike me as a radical renovation of what you're talking about here. I would say that I think it's, I think the elegance of, well, I don't know, the elegance of the bullet points and the separation of the three phases of what you believe, what you do about it, and freedom of everyone to believe that is there currently, I think is a more kind of more elegant than the large paragraphs that you have to parse. Just an impression. I can live with either.
So I think you're right. As a whole, the current Article 2 and the proposed Article 2 is really a lot of the same ideas. However, the only part of the current Article 2 that people really know about are the 7 principles. They don't see the other concepts that are now pulled into the forefront, the anti-oppression and, so things like that, and generosity. So those were kind of implied or are further down, but now we've kind of reprioritized what is in the current Article 2 and kind of brought them more to the forefront.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. If there's no other questions, or come on forward, here comes the president.
And this isn't a question, so it's a question for you. Have you talked about delegates at all?
No.
Okay. So, what will happen after this, and are you gonna have another session or so, or nope? Okay. So this is it. But there will be more information that you can have access to, I'm sure, in the newsletters coming and that sort of thing. So if you and others in the congregation want to, dive into this a little bit more or refresh your mind on what Steve has said, you can do that over the next several weeks. And at some point before the General Assembly toward the end of June, the congregation will have an opportunity to say, yeah, we think this is good, because that is what is going to tell the delegates. We have up to 5 delegates that we will send to GA online, the business meeting, this year. And if you want to be a delegate, that then will represent what this church comes back with in its assessment of whether to vote yes or no on this. Your role as a delegate then will be to represent our church and, you know, vote this in, or if we all come back and say, no, we don't want this, then you will represent us and say no. But the link to submit your application to be a delegate has been out there for a while. And the last time I looked, there were no applications to be a delegate to this year's GA, which with something like this, it would be kind of fun to say that, you know, I was a delegate at GA when we voted in this update to our Article 2 that hasn't been updated since 1987. So right now, it's under the Here's What's Happening page on the website, and there's a link to the form to submit to be a delegate, and the board will then approve, take a look at whoever has submitted, and will approve that, you know, by the June meeting, but perhaps before the June board meeting. And then I'll have Sherry put that in the next couple of newsletters and weeklies as well. But if you would like to be a delegate to represent the church, please submit your application to do so, and we will have representation there at GA on this vote.
Thank you. So GA this year is strictly online. So if you would like to be a delegate, it will cost you nothing if all you want to do is attend the business meetings. If you want to do some of the workshops too, then there is an added cost, but you don't have to pay for hotel, you don't have to pay for travel, which is the thing that we've done in the past, although it has gone where it is multi-platform, so you can be, other GAs will be in person and online, so you can still be a delegate and not have to attend GA. It's just that this year they went all online. And we have five delegates, so we will have 5 people voting for the church, as well as Mandy and myself. We have credentials that allow us to be delegates, but we're voting for ourselves, not necessarily for the church. You have 5 delegates voting for the church. Any other questions? Go get some more brownies and cookies while they're still there. You're welcome.